Eleanor Vance walked into First National Bank like she owned it. Confidence radiated from every step. Tall, poised, a woman who had clawed her way to the top and refused to be dismissed. Her navy blazer hugged her frame, sharp and impeccable. Her heels clicked against the marble floor, echoing in the quiet lobby as if announcing her presence. She was here for business, serious business, and she wasn't about to let anyone treat her like she didn't belong. But when her eyes met Brenda Miller's behind the counter, everything shifted. The cold, dismissive look that Brenda gave her was unmistakable. Eleanor didn't miss it. "She's sizing me up," Eleanor thought. And it was clear. Brenda didn't think she belonged here. "You own a business?" Brenda sneered, her voice dripping with doubt. Eleanor didn't flinch. She had heard it all before. But this time, something snapped inside her. She was done with the assumptions, the backhanded comments. She wasn't just any woman walking into a bank. She was a major shareholder in this very institution. And those words were about to bring the whole place to a halt. Eleanor's response froze Brenda in place. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Everyone in the bank knew something had just shifted. And Eleanor wasn't done yet. Eleanor Vance stood at the bank counter, her posture flawless, her eyes locked onto Brenda Miller's with quiet intensity. The bank around them hummed with soft murmurs, the atmosphere polished, immaculate. But inside Eleanor, a storm was brewing. She had dealt with this kind of treatment before, the casual, almost imperceptible discrimination that tried to undermine her every step, every success. Today, she wasn't about to let it slide. Not here, not now. Brenda, a middle-aged teller with sharp features, barely acknowledged the documents Eleanor had handed her. Instead, her eyes scanned Eleanor's attire, her expression skeptical, dismissive. She had no idea who Eleanor was or the power that simmered just beneath her calm exterior. The way Brenda looked at her, the assumption, the judgment, it was something Eleanor had endured countless times. She was used to it, but it still stung. "Can I help you?" Brenda asked, her voice cool, detached, almost bored. Eleanor's pulse quickened, but she kept her face neutral. "I need to make a wire transfer," she replied smoothly, laying out her request like it was any other. Brenda glanced at the papers Eleanor had given her, frowning as she quickly flicked through them. I'm going to need more than this," she said flatly. "Do you have a business debit card? Maybe a checkbook? Something with your name on it." "Something with my name on it?" Eleanor's grip on the folder tightened. She could feel the heat of Brenda's gaze, the assumption that Eleanor didn't belong. She wasn't just questioning the documents, she was questioning her right to be there. "I've already provided everything you need for verification," Eleanor said, her voice calm, but the steel in it was unmistakable. But Brenda wasn't having it. Her eyes narrowed. "Sorry, but without something official from the bank, I can't proceed. We can't be too careful these days. You'd be surprised at how many fraud cases we get." The words hung in the air, thick with implication. Fraud. She thinks I'm trying to defraud the bank. Eleanor's breath caught for a moment. She had walked into this bank expecting a straightforward transaction. Instead, she was standing face to face with someone who had already decided she wasn't good enough. "But no, not today. Not this time. I'd like to speak to your manager," Eleanor said, her voice dropping just enough to let Brenda know she wasn't going anywhere. Brenda's eyes flickered, and for a moment, there was a pause before Brenda rolled her eyes and pressed a button to call for help. A few moments later, the manager, Stephen Hayes, appeared, his tailored suit sharp, but his expression unsure. He glanced from Eleanor to Brenda, clearly unaware of the tension that had been building. "Ms. Miller, what seems to be the issue here?" he asked. Brenda quickly turned on the charm. "This woman is trying to make a very large transfer, and I just want to ensure that everything is legitimate. You know how these things go." Eleanor didn't let her finish. Your employee has refused to process my transaction despite me providing all the required documents, she said firmly. She's also insinuated that I don't look like someone who should be conducting this kind of business. Stephen's face shifted. He could no longer ignore the weight of Eleanor's words. The bank had fallen completely silent. The other tellers at their stations had stopped what they were doing, watching the exchange unfold. Stephen turned to Brenda. His voice was stern now. Is that true? Brenda's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her cheeks flushed with the sudden realization that her words were no longer just her own. Eleanor had turned the tables, and there was no way for Brenda to pretend this was just a misunderstanding. I was just following policy, Brenda mumbled, but her voice lacked conviction. Stephen didn't let her finish. His voice dropped, cold and precise. We do not discriminate against our customers, Ms. Miller. If you cannot proceed with this transaction, I will handle it myself. The tension in the bank thickened. It wasn't just about Eleanor's wire transfer anymore. It was about a system, a culture that had long been accustomed to treating people like Eleanor as if they didn't belong, as if their successes didn't matter. Stephen turned to Eleanor, his expression now serious. I deeply apologize for the inconvenience, Ms. Vance. Let me handle your transfer immediately. Eleanor nodded, her face betraying none of the fury that churned inside her. But then, as she handed Stephen the documents to complete the transaction, she leaned in just slightly. Her voice was measured, but laced with a quiet venom. Since we're talking about fraud, Ms. Miller, you might want to be careful because I happen to be one of the largest shareholders in this bank. The words hung in the air. The entire bank seemed to freeze. Brenda's face went white. Her fingers trembled, but she couldn't speak. She had no idea who she was dealing with. She had no idea that the woman she dismissed so easily was, in fact, someone who held the power to turn her entire world upside down. Eleanor's gaze was unwavering. I will be reviewing how employees treat customers, starting with you. A stunned silence followed. Eleanor turned to Stephen. Her tone was cool as ever. Please process my transfer. Brenda stood there, frozen. The bank had shifted on its axis. No one moved. No one spoke. The tension was palpable. The room filled with an unspoken understanding that this was more than just a simple transaction. It was a reckoning. Stephen quickly processed the transfer, but Eleanor didn't move immediately. She stood there for a moment, allowing the weight of the moment to settle. She turned to Brenda one last time, her eyes cold. You might want to reconsider how you treat your customers next time. With that, Eleanor turned and walked away. But as she left, something unexpected happened. The atmosphere in the bank began to change. The customers who had been silently watching the scene now exchanged glances, some nodding in quiet approval. A few customers, especially black customers who had witnessed the entire ordeal, gave Eleanor subtle, appreciative nods. One older man in a suit approached her, a knowing look in his eyes. You did more in 20 minutes than I've been trying to do for 20 years, he said, clapping her on the shoulder. Eleanor smiled, a quiet satisfaction blooming inside her. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for every person who had been overlooked, dismissed, or made to feel like they didn't belong. A week later, Eleanor sat in a sleek conference room at the bank's corporate headquarters, facing Richard Thompson, the regional director. The weight of the conversation was palpable. Eleanor slid a thick folder across the table. This is a report on the discrimination complaints received by your bank over the past 5 years, she said. Richard hesitated, his fingers trembling slightly as he flipped through the documents. His face darkened with every page. This is a serious problem, he said, his voice tight. Eleanor didn't flinch. I'm not here for apologies. I'm here to discuss solutions. And that's when Richard understood. Eleanor wasn't asking for change. She was demanding it. 2 months later, the bank had implemented a racial bias audit, mandatory sensitivity training for employees, and a direct complaint hotline for customers to report discrimination. News outlets covered the story, and soon Eleanor's fight became a symbol of resistance, of accountability, and of a long-overdue reckoning in the financial world. But Eleanor didn't stop there. She leveraged her position as a major shareholder to ensure the changes were not just superficial, but deeply ingrained in the bank's culture and policies. She worked closely with Richard Thompson and the board of directors to establish a diversity and inclusion task force with real power to enact change and monitor progress. Brenda Miller was eventually terminated after a thorough review of her conduct and multiple similar complaints from other customers surfaced. Eleanor also publicly committed a significant portion of her dividends to fund financial literacy programs in underserved communities and initiatives aimed at promoting equitable access to banking services. While she did not ultimately open her own financial institution, Eleanor became a powerful advocate within First National Bank, ensuring that the institution lived up to its responsibility to serve all members of the community with dignity and respect. Her actions left a lasting impact, transforming not only the bank but also inspiring customers and employees alike to demand and expect a more just and equitable financial landscape.